pretty good company name. I wish I had come up with it myself.
Hi, I'm Amanda from Adomni, Senior Client Partner, and super excited to be here today. I don't normally get a microphone because I'm from Long Island, I'm Italian, so I'll try and not keep it too close. But yeah, I think this is going to be a great discussion, Rachel.
I'm looking forward to it too. I'm Rachel Porges. I'm CMO on acid is how I describe the role. I have everything from innovation to sales and marketing and creative for this little division of Mars Pet Care that we call Nom Nom. So thanks for having me.
Yes, should we do a little background on you before we dive in?
Yeah, I have a bit of a career. This whole disruption thing is sort of native. I was talking to somebody before who just came from Neutrogena. I started my career at Neutrogena after business school. And we always sort of fancied ourselves a bit of a disruptor within the J&J universe way back when. I was there about 10 years after the acquisition, and we were doing everything we could to stay relevant and different. Don't know what's happening now. I went from there to Unilever, where I got sort of the classical training ground, but even at Unilever, I sort of made my name sort of giving the middle finger to process. I actually launched PF Chang's. I did a bunch of things that sort of were anti what Unilever was all about at the time. Sold the business, got into the private equity space, was doing that for about 10 years at a bunch of companies, Hello Products, Kaiser's Natural Pet. I ran marketing at JSX. If anybody's keeping track of the categories I've worked in, it's a laundry list. I was CMO at Levain Bakery, so if you've eaten a 6-ounce cookie, you're welcome. And now I joined Nom Nom as a contractor and have been here for about 4 years. I turned down the offer before the deal, not my finest decision, but have joined since.
I love it. Well, this is going to be a great discussion, and I got to say, Danone, thank you for hosting us. I walked in, saw those fridges stocked, and was so excited. I mean, I ate breakfast, I had coffee, I don't miss a meal, and I went right for a yogurt and tea, so appreciate the hospitality here.
The Stoke iced coffee is pretty good.
It is. Yeah. It's in my fridge at home, too. I had that this morning. All right, well, let's dig in, right? Let's talk a little bit about bridging mindsets. So you've worked in traditional marketing, startups, and now a hybrid environment. How do you blend the classical marketing framework with that entrepreneurial spirit to drive innovation?
It's a great question, and I think that all of us have a little bit of this in us. So for anybody who's worked in a classical environment, who's been trained in the classical environment, somebody said earlier that we should all start there. I agree. I tell young marketers all the time, please start at a big CPG because you learn how to do it right. You learn the 4 Ps or the 5 Cs. You learn the structured thinking. And when you get into the startup world, you take that with you and you throw a whole lot of it out. Because you throw out a lot of what you do for the sake of consensus building and what you do for the sake of covering our asses collectively. And I think what I've taken with me now to this role is a little bit of both, right? I can move at the nimbleness of the desperation that comes with waiting for your next capital investment or trying to extend that lead time as long as possible. But if you look at my notebook, it's filled with 4 Ps analyses. If you look at every deck I put forward or every conversation I have, it's based in a very clear brief because I learned how to do that as a junior marketer. And what I strive to tell my team now is to think like that. Lauren mentioned having that one clear message at the beginning of a brief. That's all that matters when we do creative, right? There should be nothing else that really matters. All that matters is price, product, placement, positioning. Know those things and you can make a lot of decisions really fast. And so having the classical training, but then knowing what it's like to have the desperation is sort of key. And I think the other piece of it, and we may get to this again, you'll hear me maybe repeat myself over and over and over again because I have a script, but the consumer is everything. And I think what startups do better than anyone is find a consumer insight and lean into it, right? I don't care if it's in the 25-year-old startup that was Levain Bakery. They knew what their cookie was, and they've leaned into the cookie, and that was everything for us, and it continues to be everything. And I think it's no different than when Craig Dubinsky created Hello Products, and I was employee number 1 there. Like, he had an insight around what we were going to do. He had probably 10 insights, but we knew what our consumer was going to be, and we chased that full bore. And the nice thing about founders is they've drunk their Kool-Aid and do that brilliantly. The hard thing is they've drunk their Kool-Aid. But I think if you can take that diehard passion for the consumer, mesh it with sort of classical structured thinking, you end up with a pretty good marketing plan.
Yeah. All right, before we go into my next question, I need to do like a little pulse check here because it's around the topic of data versus institution. And as I was thinking about this, I was like, is it data? Is it data? I got to get a pulse check. Raise your hand if you say data. All right, I might be outnumbered. Raise your hand if you say data. Okay, sorry, I'm outnumbered. So data versus institution. In your experience, how do you balance data-driven decision-making with trusting your gut instincts, especially when moving quickly in a disruptive environment?
I love data. I trust my gut, but I love data. And I think that the best gut instinct has some sort of data behind it. And so what we do and what we have strived to do to remain nimble is to test and learn early and carry the insight through so that you're not constantly relitigating the question. And I think that's where, going back to the sort of the briefing exercise, if you know what you're trying to achieve, you know the insight that's supposed to be motivating, then it's just about interpretations of that, and you can test and learn on that. That's where I'll get into gut, or that's where I'll get into flexible A/B testing. I won't necessarily relitigate the brief over and over again. And I have a couple of examples at the end that we did that with. We did a whole brain strategy. We did it in about 2 months with a really flexible, nimble partner. Used very flexible, nimble research companies to do it, but then we executed the hell out of it internally. And so, when we didn't retest it, we didn't test every piece. We maybe threw some things into post-testing, again, sort of cheap and dirty, but not redoing the whole thing. And that's where you have to have a deep reliance that you know that you tested it well enough to be able to just follow your gut the rest of the way.
Like it. Okay, so talk to us about cultivating disruption. How do you maintain and foster a challenger mindset within a larger corporate structure?
We sort of fancy ourselves at nom nom antagonists in chief at Mars, particularly when it comes to fresh, right? You got one of the biggest kibble manufacturers in the world, one of the bigger canned food manufacturers in the world, and here's a hint, some of the share is declining because the fresh food category is plus 40% year over year. So we have, and it's funny, my GM comes from 16 years at Mars, and he loves being an antagonist now and an agitator in chief. He's fully enjoying it, and I'm always that way, so. So we ask a lot more questions of our colleagues. We challenge them, we demonstrate how to move faster because we can. We have a lot less to lose on a $100 million brand than somebody who runs a $1 billion brand. You won't find me on a $1 billion brand tomorrow, most likely. But we really spend a lot of time and effort asking questions and sort of pointing out different ways of doing things. When we created the ad, the president of North America for Royal Canin, who owns us, sort of sat back in a chair and he looked at me and he's like, "Can you play it again?" I was like, "Oh God, he's gonna tell me I can't run it." I was freaking out. And he's like, "How did you do that in 6 weeks?" I was like, "Well, we had a really good strategy. We used internal creative. We did it really fast. We hired a production agency I knew before, and we ran." "Can I see it again?" And he's, "Where are you running it?" We just had moved so fast because we didn't get belabored by trying to make sure everybody felt good about it. We felt good about it. We have the benefit of a fairly small organization, but we also have a lot of trust. And I think with great responsibility comes, or with great trust comes great responsibility. And so I think we've trusted everybody from our most junior social media coordinator to our very experienced creative director to be wedded to the brief, to be wedded to what we're trying to achieve, and then create against it. And I think it's made it so that we get to do that. And so we just show that to our colleagues across the board. And we go on charm offensives regularly. We're constantly presenting Nom Nom to the rest of the organization as a brand that has that capability, both because we want to entice people to want to work in this environment, because Nom Nom's special in the Mars universe, but also to just show them that it's possible.
Good segue to my next question, because you mentioned people, right, and team building for innovation. So when building a team capable of disrupting from within, what key qualities or profiles do you look for, and how do you develop those traits for your team members?
So everybody we've hired in, I'd say, the last 2 years to work at Nom Nom, at least in the marketing department, has some big company experience, has some classical training. At least the directors, right? So the sort of more experienced marketers, they all have a little bit of that classical and have said, nah, I'm ready for a change, or have done something slightly different. So we look for people who have sort of that duality that I talked about. And then from a junior marketer, I look for people who are hungry. I want grit, I want resilience, right? I look for things in the interview process that demonstrates that. Tell me about a time when you failed and what you learned. Tell me about a time when you royally fucked something up. I have so many examples from my career of things I did so wrong, and I share that. I think we also look for people who want to be vulnerable, who want to take responsibility, who want to put themselves out on a line. I don't look for people who tell me about how they had a team of 20 contemplating the idea for 6 months. That's not going to necessarily succeed. And so, and even if they come from a big company, you can still do hungry, entrepreneurial, exciting things in large organizations. I did it at Unilever, and so I know it's possible. I think we also, and this sort of goes back to how do you cultivate a team. If Linda was here, I would challenge her, but like, you have to empower your people to have a disruptive mentality. You cannot create, and Linda's great with this, so I don't have to tell her this, obviously, but I think you can't have an organization that lives in fear of messing up. You have to live in an organization that lives in fear of boredom, or who lives in fear of complacency. Maybe not lives in fear of it, but has a little dose of it on the side somewhere. And I think that we as leaders, we as the CMOs or the presidents or whoever it is, need to be stepping forward and saying, here's a space where we can have that flexibility. It doesn't have to be every day, all day, it doesn't have to be every brand, everywhere. But let's find those opportunities to let people have that experience, because then they carry that with them as they come up through the ranks, they carry that with them as they go to other organizations. And I think that's what we look for in the people we bring in, and that's what we look for as we develop new capabilities within our team.
That's certainly something myself in joining Adomni over a year ago that I found really attractive about the company, is how they were being very bullish and innovative in what's been a very traditional space. So one might even say, right, disrupting.
Totally.
Or reorientating the at-home mindset by incorporating features like hyper-relevant targeting, content solutions, a video-first strategy that's then driving and measuring full funnel results. So that's really exciting to hear from you. I know we have one last question that we wanted to show an awesome example of. So can you walk us through this of how you implemented a nimble, disruptive approach to a marketing strategy at NomNom?
Yeah, so NomNom is part of Mars, right? So we've got big agencies on our beck and call, which we do not use, admittedly. And that's no offense to big agencies. We just don't want to, we know how big we are in the Mars universe. We know we wouldn't necessarily get the A team at all times. We hired a small shop with somebody I knew who had actually done Olipop's strategy and got them to do a very quick and dirty strategy project. For those of us who have reasonable, it's so funny, I talk about my budget now, and I think it's hysterical because I've come out of a world of 6-figure budgets, and now I have an 8-figure budget, and I don't even know what to do with it half the time. We spent maybe $200,000, and we spent maybe 6 weeks executing the project. I mean, that's nothing for a brand strategy overhaul, right? And NomNom, I should sort of reflect, we are a D2C primary company, so 90% of our volume is D2C still. Our growth is all coming from non-D2C, and part of the challenge is, and somebody had said earlier, we had left our brand complacent for too long. We had to give it CPR because we didn't have a brand. We had a D2C marketing plan. When we started talking about branding several months ago, or about a year ago, we were talking about photography and artwork. We weren't talking about what does the brand mean uniquely to consumers. So we used gut check, we used Squint, and we had this great strategy. And we found this insight that was all around this idea that pet parents, everybody who has dogs, okay, how many of you guys are afraid your dog is bored while you're sitting here today? Yeah, so that's an insight, right? So about 75% of you guys raised your hand after saying you had a dog. That's the data we found. I said, oh. And NomNom, what we kept hearing is NomNom's the opposite of a boring meal. NomNom, we're not gonna educate you. We're not gonna spend farmers' dog dollars. We're not gonna be the ones to educate why fresh is best. So we leaned in on what we could do better than anything, which was be the most exciting dog food brand. So we came up with this strategy. And then we brought it in-house. And so the idea is that, I don't have a clicker actually, so I don't know how we're getting to these slides, come to think of it. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is actually our food. We don't use food stylists. Actually, how do I go back? So these are what I sort of write down at all times, and this is what I tell people all the time. Glean insights quickly, and then don't over analyze them, right? If somebody tells you you're the opposite of a boring meal, don't delve too deep into what boring is. Just know that that's what they care about. Partner with agencies, strategists, and creatives who work really nimbly. That's what I was just talking about. Leverage brand passionate creatives, and with all due respect to everybody here, internal where possible to create. No one loves your brand as much as you do. And I appreciate my agency partners. We work with a lot of them still. But man, taking this to our internal creative, set it on fire really, really fast. And then iterate, but don't overdo it. Don't relitigate, iterate. Those are two different things. Don't question the insight. Come up with new ways to address the insight. And so what we did is we said, okay, that ad on the left, the gray ad, we fondly call it pork stacks. That ran on Meta for the better part of 3 years, and we could not trick the algorithm into getting rid of it until we shut off advertising for a while, and then relaunched similar but very different advertising that had a lot more excitement, a lot more impact, and a lot more dog presence, which is kind of a nice thing considering it's a dog food brand. We changed our landing page, so from pork stacks to what we're all about now. We got such higher conversion rate when we did this. I can't remember the data off the top of my head, but each of these things had better click-through rate, better conversion rate, better engagement every time we did it. And then we ran the ad. What this ad did is it didn't talk about why fresh was better. It didn't get you into science and education. We have that if you want to delve deeper. Go on our website, we'll tell you all about the board-certified vet nutritionist who helped create it. But it leaned into the insight. This cost us $100,000, and we did it in a day. And we took this and ran it in a select number of markets and had 20% higher conversions in those markets almost overnight on fairly lean media dollars. And then we weren't really, we put it through Zappy, tested stupid high, enough that I asked them to please rerun it. And then we asked our creative team to come up with another version. So a slightly different take, a little less emotional, a little bit more impactful, and this cost us $3,000 in a video in about 4 days. And so when I say disrupt, just keep challenging, keep finding new iterations, and keep bringing it to life in different ways. So that's sort of the creative campaign, and I think it's so funny to work within Mars because this would never happen. They're testing everything so thoroughly, brilliantly, and they print cash. I can't criticize. I'm just saying there's another way to go about it.
I love it. And as a dog mom myself, the first creative, right, really played on that emotions of like, I do that. I get up. I know I have a long day ahead. We're going to the dog park. And I know you had an activation right at Madison Square Garden.
I should have put that video. We were at Bark in the Park at Madison Square Park last week, and we had a giant ball pit that was made to look like a dog bowl. And we had the dogs being professionally photographed in it, and it was insane. It was amazing.
Luna would have made a great model.
We still have, actually, no, that's not true. I was going to say we still have the ball pit. We did not. There was a lot of pee.
Well, I'm glad we got rid of that. But why don't we round this out with some questions for Rachel? Or just tell us about your dog.
So, really great start here, platform.
We got a microphone coming.
Where do you see this going next? I mean, it's off to a great start from what you're showing.
Honestly, this is going to go for bigger reach, right? So we've been narrow. So I've got a 2-year runway with most of this creative. We'll continue to iterate. We've got a new box coming, a new box insert coming, a new website coming. So now it's just about reaching further. I think one of the things about being disruptive is you don't have to do it every 6 months. You know, that is a bit of my classical training. Somebody said to me once, somebody from Lauder, I think, if I'm not mistaken, told me that you have to use creative to the point of boredom and then beyond because nobody else sees it as much as you do. They don't know that it's happening, and we as marketers get bored really easily. Disrupt, but then don't overdo it. Like at some point, you've got to make sure that there's enough people reaching this. This hasn't hit a national audience. I've got a lot more room to grow with that. And we have 2 new recipes coming, so super exciting to do that.
So as a challenger brand and I guess a challenger category, at what point did you have that light bulb moment of knowing you didn't need to explain the product anymore? What made you different?
The consumer insights. We did qual, when I say qual, we interviewed 6 consumers. And so nimble call here, right? And when you start hearing the same thing for 5 of those 6, you start saying, there's a trend here. Our consumer, when we talk to our own consumers and we talk to our CX agents, they're no longer getting calls about why fresh. There are $2 billion brands in this space that have been advertising at the rate of about $200 million a year in TV. No amount of my share of voice was going to help with that education process. We just needed to be the best of that bunch. And I couldn't waste the limited time I had to do it. I think that's what it came down to. If you only have one thing you can say, if I had to sit there and educate people why fresh, I can't do it as well as Farmer's Dog is going to do. I can deliver fresh better, hopefully, but I couldn't spend the money or the time or the energy that they had put into it, or Freshpet over 18 years. I sort of said, you go forth and prosper, we're going to be here to pick up the rest.
It's good perspective, right, on like knowing your landscape, being aware of your competitors, but keeping that focus to your brand.
It was so almost liberating because suddenly our creative could go in a totally different place. We didn't have to be wedded to vets in white coats. We could go pink.
Fun.
Right? We didn't have to be green and white and sort of the colors and the tropes of this category. Somebody asked me once what I hate most in the category. I hate the words healthy, happy pets. And nobody says they want your dog to die faster and shit more. I say this in every meeting, as if anybody's heard me speak before, you've heard it from me, but nobody says that. And so what they won't say is, I don't want my dog to be bored, but they all feel it. If I can tap into something unique and interesting and then make them feel something, that's just so much more powerful. And it motivates my team to just continue thinking about new ways to make them excited.
So awesome. Well, thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
We're at time here, so thank you, everyone.